Welcome to Conversations with Sarah. I'm your host, Sarah Reddan, therapeutic coach, creator of the Self-Care Club, and author of the Self-Care Journey books. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to be notified of new episodes. And today, I am joined by Melanie Stevens from Melanie Stevens Healing and Guidance to have a conversation about Reiki. Hi, thank you for joining me.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
That's absolutely my pleasure. I love speaking with you. We kind of met in real life and we are together on social media. So I'm very interested to learn a bit more about your way of working and share what Reiki is with our listeners today. Would you like to introduce yourself for the people that don't know you?
Yeah, of course. I'm Melanie Stevens, like Sarah said, Melanie Stevens, Guidance and Healing. I'm a Reiki master. I also work with crystals, which we're going to be talking about today, and how I work with Reiki because I work with distance healing. And I'm also a spiritual teacher. I do courses, and I'm a tarot reader. So many plates spinning.
Yeah. And also you are one of our guest experts in the Self-Care Journey group and you share on Tarot Tuesday.
I do. I love Tarot Tuesday. Yeah.
So let's start with Reiki. How do you describe Reiki to people? So if no one's ever heard of it before, what would you say?
It's Reiki is energy healing. It's one of those things. Is most people have heard of Reiki, but they don't know what it is. They're not sure
Yeah.
if it's either physical, like a massage, or if it's something spiritual. And it's kind of it is a spiritual practice. It's a very calming, meditative practice where I connect to the ascended masters who taught Reiki on the earth. And they connect me to Reiki, which is a universal life force energy. It's channeled through me into the person I'm giving Reiki to. So I don't have Reiki within me. It's not coming from me. It's a universal energy that we all have access to. The way we get access is to have training, and we receive something called an attunement, where another Reiki master will attune you to this energy so that you can bring it through. It typically comes through the hands
Mm.
and into the person that's receiving it. So it's an energy in itself that comes in to balance our physical energies. It balances our chakras, and it can bring everything back into alignment. So it's a great tool for people who are struggling with physical aches and pains and conditions, but also emotional healing and balancing. And that's really what I tend to use it more for, is for bringing people into balance emotionally.
Mm. Sorry. I'm level two. I'm currently working towards my master's. Actually, by the time this is out, I probably would have completed my master's. And Reiki is something that I've been interested in for over 20 years, but I've always had like a struggle with it. So I did my first attunement over 20 years ago. And it's one of those things like it's not tangible, is it? You can't, it's not very like evidence based, but there is evidence. So what kind of brought you into Reiki? What, like for you, I'm really interested in your journey into Reiki.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always heard of Reiki, and many years ago, I remember my husband was poorly, and I instinctively put my hands out on his body, and I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't connected to Reiki back
Mm.
then. I just felt like I wanted to help, and it just felt like a natural thing to do. That was like a one-off, and I didn't look into Reiki at the time. I carried on just living my life. But I did find my spiritual path when I was 28, and I started learning about spiritual teachers like Eckhart Tolle and reading spiritual books and opening up. It wasn't until, when did I start learning? I think it was 4 years ago now, that when you just get like a nudge and you don't know where
Mm.
it's coming from, it's like somebody's just poked you and gone, Oi, you need to do that. And I just felt suddenly like, I'm going to learn Reiki. And I got really excited about it, and I just did it. I just went for it because I thought if I start learning it and I don't connect with it or I don't enjoy it, I'll just stop. I've got nothing to lose.
Mm.
So I began learning online, and I did a combination. I did some distance learning and some in person. I had two Reiki masters
Yeah.
because, like you, I wanted to feel something, and I thought I can learn online. I can learn all the theory, and I understand it, and I can get everything I need. But I want to actually feel it in person with an actual live person in front of me. So I did
Mm.
it in both ways. Sorry, I've completely forgotten the question.
No, it's fine. I think I've forgotten myself. I think it was how
How
you
did
got
I
into
get into
Reiki. I feel
Reiki?
like you're answering it. It's interesting to me. So carry on.
Yeah, so I just fell into it. Really felt like somebody had nudged me in that way, and I did the combination of the in-person learning and the online, and just loved it. And
Mm.
so I carried on and did it all the way through to the master. I got to the same stage as you, actually. I got to Reiki 2, and I felt like at Reiki 2, you can be a practitioner. You can use Reiki on other people. I'd got everything I needed. I was about to set up and actually start doing it as a business just as COVID hit and the first lockdown. So, of course, that put me back and I couldn't start working doing Reiki with people.
Mm.
So then I thought, well, I might as well do the masters now because I can't actually start working with it yet. So that's why I went back into the studying and I
Yeah.
got it all done.
Yeah.
Enjoy the master course. It's you learn a whole load of new techniques.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. It's been my sort of journey with Reiki has been quite interesting, should we say? Because I learned in person, level 1, level 2, um, and because of how I looked at the world, and it whilst I fully believed in all of the energy and everything, I really sort of struggled with my logical brain, that kind of need to have evidence, to have proof. So even though I would do Reiki with like the children with consent and be like, can you feel this? Like, like energy stroking, and I would get evidence. I would have moments where it was a treatment that I would offer with clients, because I used to do like my holistic therapist, my massage, and I would combine it with body work and do sort of stuff like that. And I would offer it, and then my experiences would be so powerful, it would frighten me almost, and I would be like, oh, I don't know how to be with all of this.
Yeah.
And I would withdraw from it and sort of take some time and kind of like almost shy away from it. And I think it's like, as I've been through this most recent evolution of what it is to be me, I've come back around to being much more okay with the experiences that I have. And I've been working with Luna, who's been one of our previous guests, to go through my Reiki from the beginning again, because it just felt like something I wanted to do from the beginning rather than just go straight in, because I'm a different person to who I was 20 years ago, and I knew it would be a different experience. And I think that when we start talking about Reiki and energy, that can be quite a normal reaction to people, that it sounds a bit like a bit weird. It sounds a little bit scary. It can sound a little bit intimidating. It can sound a little bit like, are you going to start like mind reading me, or are you going to start like prophesizing about things? Some Reiki, or in my experience, some Reiki therapists, masters, whatever you want to call them, practitioners, do offer those things alongside Reiki, but not everybody does. So what is your kind of Reiki session? What does that look like?
So for the distance healings, I'm offering distance healing now rather than in-person sessions. I actually combine it with crystal grid work. I did a course after I did my Reiki courses. I studied crystal Reiki, and I thought I just want to experiment and see what that's like, because I love using crystals anyway, and I wanted to bring them into the session. So with distance healing, I start by setting up a crystal grid for the recipient, and that is focused on whatever they've come to me for. So if they need to release some trauma, I've got a grid for trauma removal. If they've come to me because they want to expand their consciousness and work more with their spirit guides, I've got a grid for that. I've got one for bringing in love, self-healing, self-forgiveness, all those sorts of things. So I start by setting up a crystal grid and setting it with the intention to help that person. And I use Reiki, I send Reiki into the crystals, and they're set up in a specific way. And there's certain crystals that I use depending on the grid.
Mm.
So that's actually how I start the session, is setting up this crystal grid, activating it. And then I send a photo of the grid at the end of the session to the recipient. And then I move into the distance healing. And the distance healing, as you'll know, because you've done Reiki too, you get a chance of distance healing when you do the second level Reiki. It's you connect to it by, there's a symbol called Honshaze Shonen. You draw the symbol in the air and you connect to your client through this ancient symbol. What you're doing then is connecting to their energy. So they don't have to be in the same room. They don't have to be in the same country. You're still connecting into their energy. And then you send Reiki to them as if they were in the room with you, and it still has the same effect. In fact, some people think it's even more powerful, and they can feel where I am. So when I speak to them afterwards, they'll say, did you start at my head, and did you work down here? And they've sort of felt tingling and buzzing throughout their body. And we know we can connect to people energetically when they're not physically with us, and that's why you might randomly think of a person you haven't seen for 3 or 4 years, and then they randomly, she says, think of you at the same time, but one of you picks up the phone and says, oh, you've just popped into my head, and you realize you were both thinking about each other, because I believe that's one of you has thought about the other person, and the other person has felt somebody coming into their energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you do energy work, when someone's talking about you, when somebody's with you. And it's the same with people in spirit. When you've been joined in your energy by somebody, you can physically feel it. So that's how we connect people, by distance. And then the session is exactly the same. I send Reiki to wherever it's needed. If they are having some sort of emotional trauma that might be affecting the heart chakra, I'll focus the energy there, although I will send it everywhere. And that's dependent on what they've come to me for. So we have a conversation before the session. What is it that I can help you with? And then I know where to focus that Reiki energy for their highest good.
And that's the phrase that I was sort of going to bring up next. It is for the highest good, and also consent's really, really important, isn't it? With Reiki and energy, any kind of energy work.
Yeah, 100%. So, much as it's a wonderful thing to be able to do energy healing, you do need to have the consent of the person that you're sending it to. They've got to be ready to receive it. And with Reiki and any energy work, it can bring up stuff sometimes that needs to be healed. So if somebody is going through some emotional trauma, it might be that something's been suppressed, and the Reiki can bring that to the surface, and often does. So some people will feel quite emotional after a Reiki session. They might cry, they might have weird dreams, and that's the things that need to be released coming up to the surface on their way out. So they're not going to hang around, but it will move out. You can't just do that randomly for somebody without asking them first. It could put them into a healing crisis. They might not know what's happening to them. So like with anything, consent is really important. I know it's all done with the highest intention, but we do have to have the consent of that person before we start going into their energy.
And that's any son who's sort of ethical, working with energy, never, as reflecting back to like, oh, you're going to start doing things, you're just going to start doing things to me. No one that works ethically does things to people. It is, as you say, it's offered with consent, it's offered with greater good, it's offered to be received, as opposed to being forced onto someone.
Exactly. And it's the same with tarot reading as well. I will get occasionally people saying to me, can you do me a reading? Can you tell me what this person's doing, or are they thinking about me, or does this person and I can't go into somebody else's energy without their permission. It's not ethical, and I won't do it. I can only tell the person I'm reading for what they need to know about a situation for their highest good, but I won't go into other people's energy without their permission.
That's really important, actually. I never thought, I mean, obviously I just do things that way. I've never been asked that question. Never considered that somebody might even ask that question. So that's quite useful for me to be aware of.
It's the same principle, isn't it? It's just not, you need consent to go into somebody's energy. It's not.
Completely. I mean, it's the same with anything else. With doing like the counselling work, you can't counsel somebody that's not in the session, or theorize about, or diagnose somebody that's not working. You're working with the person that's in front of you. You can't be working with other people outside of the space. But I'm going to try bring myself back to Reiki. We're talking about Reiki today. And your tarot. So do you want to talk a little bit more about tarot and crystal, and sort of bring in what you want to share about that?
Yeah, so I started tarot reading probably 3 years ago now. So I've not been reading that long compared to some tarot readers. You meet some who've been reading for like 30 years. But I absolutely loved it the minute I started learning. And I am a bit of a geek. I do like learning and studying. I love courses. I love books. I'm always
Same.
I think a lot of us who are in this sort of industry, if you like, we do like the learning side. I like to know how things work. And so I learned traditional tarot. You don't have to. You can use the tarot intuitively and never pick up a book in your life. But I thought, no, I need to know. I get FOMO. I want to know, what am I missing? I need that knowledge. So that's how I learned initially. And then I learned how to use my intuition, because I don't want to get stuck in bringing my brain in too much, because then I'm just remembering the cards, turning them over and saying, well, that's what that means. You need to intuitively feel, but how does that connect to the person you're reading to, and how does it connect to the other cards, and what symbols are jumping out and what colors are jumping out? So I combine now. I read tarot traditionally and with intuition. And I would like to start teaching tarot. It is on the list. The list is huge, but it is on the list that I want to start teaching. I've started to do some courses, and I've done a course that's on my website for self-healing and releasing, and
Mm.
it's done through journaling and a meditation. And it incorporates something called the Sedona method, which is a way of releasing the things that aren't serving our highest good.
Mm.
And then I've just done a course which I'm about to finish on crystals, and it's aimed at beginners, people who don't know anything about crystals, but how to use them. Again, just for that gentle self-healing. It's not a course that will qualify people to use crystals on others, because that comes
Mm.
further down the line. It's how to use them yourself to bring you back into balance. There's so many wonderful therapies and tools out there, natural ones that can really help you to get back into alignment. And crystals are perfect for that, to just bring you back into that centered space. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I do my teaching as well, which I love. I love doing the
Yeah.
courses.
I think a lot of practitioners kind of come into these therapies as like starts as a self-healing tool, and then we realize just how powerful it is. And like I think Reiki for many is like is a gateway, isn't it? In and crystals also, because they're beautiful and they're nice to touch, and then you start to get all the healing benefit of it, and it just expands that mindset around what is possible and what we can do. And when you experience what on the surface was like a pretty stone that you're holding, changes symptoms or issues that you're having, it's like, whoa, this is, hold on, I can use a pretty stone, or I can use an energy. It's, I don't even know where I'm going with this. Like I've got so like caught up in the whole like, yeah. So we start, I think, as practitioners with this self-healing, and it's the self-healing that when we've experienced how powerful that is, it's like, I need I need to learn how to use this and share with others so they can also self-heal. Because I'm strongly of the opinion that we all have that ability. We all hold our own ability to heal.
Yeah,
We don't necessarily need to always be looking outside of ourselves. Sometimes we need a little bit of guidance to tap into our own stuff, or to get connected with the limiting beliefs that are actually holding us back, or like to be able to you've got the trees behind you, be able to see like through all of the trees and actually see that bit of light that sort of says, yeah, this is it, I can step into it. But I think most of us, all of us have got that tool within that to self-heal. So I think that's a really beautiful place to start, kind of that sort of space of finding a little course or finding something that kind of connects you in with that self-healing concept.
yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. We've all got the ability. None of us have got something special that isn't available to everybody. But when you're starting out, it is useful to have somebody, go and have a Reiki session, see how it feels, have a crystal healing session. And if you feel better afterwards, you feel a bit lighter and brighter, and you've got a spring in your step, you know that something shifted. And
Mm.
that, I mean, that's actually what brought me to Reiki. I did actually have a couple of sessions with other people before I started learning it myself, and it was lovely. Um, so it's helpful to have a guide or a mentor. It's helpful to learn from somebody. But once you've got that, you can go on your own journey. And I think there's nothing better than empowering somebody to be able to heal themselves. Even if you just start small and gentle and just do this sort of introductory, or this is how you do this and this is how you do that, and to spark that interest in another person, and they then go on their own healing journey, is wonderful. And then
Mm.
as we get to the stage where we're so happy with it, we want to share it with the world, like you say, we want to teach it, we want to share it. And that's the stage that many of us are at now. But it's come from self-healing. That's how we start. We heal ourselves first. We have to start with ourselves. You can't
Yeah.
heal other people if you haven't been on that journey yourself.
No, no, completely not. Because you then, I mean, we all have wounds, but your wounds need to be healed enough that you're not operating from that wounded space, because it's not healthy, and you bring in your own stuff, don't you, and potentially project that onto the client work that you're doing. I just had a question. So because I'm thinking about my own experience, has there ever been a time in your journey then that you've kind of questioned any of the Reiki, or is it like because of how you've journeyed that it's always felt completely aligned and completely like, yeah, I get this?
No, I question everything. My logical brain kicks in and says, yeah, but, yeah, but. how can this happen? Yeah, but that's not possible. Anything that starts with a yeah, but is generally not good. So, as humans, our human brain, our logical brain, our left brain, whatever we want to call it, kicks in quite a lot. Particularly when I was learning mediumship, it kicked in a lot then, because I just thought, nah, I'm making it up. It's me. Because I wasn't very open at the time to energies. I wasn't sensitive to them. I couldn't feel them. But when you can't feel anything and you're coming up with stuff in your head, you just think, well, this is just my brain working. This is intuition. It's not spirit. It's not spirit guides. It's just coming from me. Once you are more sensitive to energies and you feel them physically in your body, I think that's when the trust really starts to flow, because you think, wow, I couldn't create this. I'm having an actual physical sensation. But it doesn't happen to people who are closed off to it. It doesn't happen if you're not sensitive to energies. You start the healing journey and you start to become aware of these subtle energies and the subtle changes in energy when you hold a crystal, for example, and you build on that. So people who are really very, very logical and practical and don't believe in anything, who say, make me feel different with a crystal, they're probably not going to have any sort of experience, because they're not open. And it does take practice. And whilst you're practicing and you feel like, I'm not getting anywhere, that's when you need that trust. Just keep going with it, keep trusting, because once you start to feel those shifts in your energy, whether that's through Reiki, whether that's through holding a crystal or something else, and you feel something, that's when you're like, oh, there's something about this. I actually felt that then. And then your life starts to flow better because you've shifted something out. But journaling is a really good way. If your logical brain kicks in quite a lot, write everything down, how you feel every day. Write down how you felt before a Reiki session or before you held a crystal. How did you feel during? How did you feel after? And you'll start to notice, as you keep doing that practice, these very subtle changes. It's not usually a big, massive shift. It's quite subtle. But you've got to persevere with it, and the trust will build as you start.
We all experience these kind of energetic feelings, like when you walk in a room and that it feels a bit off, or you have a conversation with somebody and it, it on the surface it's been a terribly polite conversation, but you come away with some sense of unease, or you just inexplicably really like someone that you've only just met. There's just something about them that feels comfortable, or feels like you want to know them. That is our energy in play there, isn't it? There's no, you just literally in the same space as somebody. You might not have ever had a conversation yet, and there's something that you feel drawn to or repelled from.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that energetically sensitive people do feel. I don't know if everybody experiences that, but it's, for me, that's quite normal. I've always been like that, but I do have people around me who don't feel anything.
Oh, that is really interesting, because I've made an assumption based on the people, even myself at my most kind of closed. I suppose I've always been quite open-minded. So myself at my most closed-minded, hold on, I'm working through this, was still quite open-minded. So I've always kind of had this, but I guess the people that I converse with as well, even the most the people who think what I talk is utter nonsense and I'm a little bit mad, still still would say, oh yeah, I don't know what it is about that person, but there's just something just
Ah,
feels a bit because so I've made an assumption that I think we all, on some level, we might not call it energy, you might not call it gut instinct, you might call it judgment, but there's something, which is a different thing, but there's just something, some way. Oh, that's interesting to consider. Yeah, maybe not everybody feels it. If you're listening and you've got something to say about this, I would love to hear it. Put it in the comments or come into group and let us know. Because never considered that there's people that have no, or don't perceive there to be any kind of reaction to other people.
yeah. I mean, I've been around people before. I've always been very sensitive since a child. So, I'll walk in somewhere and just think, oh, I don't like it in here. And I've got people around me just saying, well, it's fine. What's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong. And there is something. And it might be then I hear a raised voice, or that, if you're in a pub somewhere and you just feel like, what, it just feels like something's going to happen. I want to leave. But very often it will just be me that has that experience. And the same when you talk to somebody. and they're really down, but they don't say they're down because they put their mask on and they pretend everything's okay. And you come off the phone to them and you just feel drained and depressed, or you might feel angry and you think, where I was fine a minute ago, where's that come from? That's not mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, not everybody seems to pick up on that. Or if they do, it's so subtle that they completely dismiss it.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, doesn't it? That it's kind of it's dismissed, and there's moments I still have moments where on reflection, like on a situation will have happened maybe in work or socially or something, and I think, oh, on reflection, there was a moment where my intuition was like, this isn't the right choice, or this isn't, this isn't an aligned connection or whatever, and then whatever's whatever, and then it's like, I didn't listen. And I had that moment. And my brain went, "No, I'll be fine." It's like, oh yeah. I mean, it's nice to have these little reminders.
Yeah. But equally, you're a reflector. You reflect on things. I reflect on things. I'm a deep thinker. I'm a deep feeler. But not everybody is. And if you're just rushing through life, just living, surface level stuff, and you never sit and tap into how you're feeling, then you're not going to know that that's your intuition talking to you. And there, you might then say, well, there's no such thing as intuition, or because you're just you don't spend the time to sit with your feelings and sit with your thoughts about something that's already happened and reflect on that and think, oh, I missed something there. I'm always sitting thinking, I'm always in my own head, so I pick up on things like that, sometimes not in the moment, like you've just it might be afterwards, and I think, I knew that wasn't the right thing to do, and I ignored it and I did it anyway and it went wrong.
Yeah. I think it's so important to kind of listen to that inner voice, really, isn't it? Or to be open to listening to that inner voice. But of course, we're very conditioned as a society to just be busy and just to kind of get on with stuff and not, let's not question anything too much. We'll just do the status quo and do what we need to be doing. And for people, it is hard to sit with your own feelings, and it is hard to sit with your own experience, and it takes work, doesn't it? That's where the work happens, that quiet time, that contemplation. So not in a what's the word I want? Ruminating constantly, and not from an anxiety place, because that's a very different way of being, where you're second guessing, questioning everything you've ever done. But sort of the word I use a lot is being curious around your experience, being kind to yourself about your experience, and being reflective, and kind of just taking time to breathe and notice what your actual experience is. I definitely know there's been times in my life where I've been in relationship that was not healthy for me, but it was so what it was. There wasn't space to reflect. As I learned to do that, I came to realize that this is not okay for me, and there's things that are not okay. Sometimes we're just in a situation that it's just easier to be in the situation, and starting to open our thought process to connecting with our own feelings can be unsafe, or can feel unsafe, and so we don't do it. And there's something very much in needing safety, to have space to connecting with your thoughts, to connecting with your feelings, to connecting with your energy, to be able to really witness your own experience, is the phrase I've got coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a couple of things there. I think one, we've got really busy lives. We've got lives full of distractions, from spending time in nature and sitting and contemplating what's happening around us. We, especially people who work, they've got kids, they're constantly having to do things. So I can understand people not carving out time for themselves, even though we all know it's good for us and we need to do it. And meditation is wonderful, and a quiet space is vital for our well-being. But when people are rushing around all the time doing things, constantly on the go, by the time you stop and sit down, it's time to go to bed. So I can understand that. But I think there's another issue there, where there might be a bit of a fear. What if I stop and I contemplate what I've got and it's not what I want? That's quite scary. And I think it might be the distraction of keeping busy and not having to think about that is quite appealing, particularly if somebody is a bit unhappy in their relationship or in their job. They might not want to open that can of worms by sitting and realizing, actually, I'm really, really unhappy, because then I've got to do something about it.
Exactly that. Once you're sort of aware, it's quite hard to, I mean, people do squish it back in, squish it back down, but it just keeps coming up, and it will. And I really believe that for many people that suffer with anxiety and depression, that is part of that. That there's things in life that aren't aligned
Yeah.
and aren't serving their greater good. That we're pushing down, we're squishing down because for whatever reason it needs to be, and that is manifests in that kind of symptoms of depression and anxiety. And when we start to allow ourselves to actually feel and experience our experience, once you have that acknowledgement that this isn't aligned with me, this person isn't good for me, this place of work doesn't fulfill me, this food that I eat doesn't nourish me, this, I'm laughing because it's a conversation we were having beforehand, these things that
I
I
always
do,
get
you
that.
do, yeah, you have to, there comes a point, I think, where you have to make change because it becomes almost uncomfortable to, once you've opened your eyes to the experience that you're having that just isn't right for you, it's the need, the pull to change is so strong that you have to take action. And then actions can be really hard. Like, where do you go? What do you do? How do you do it? It's
And also, we can't always. What if you're, you're in a job that you hate, but you need to pay the bills, you need to put food on the table, you can't just leave. So sometimes we know that we're doing something we're not happy with, but we haven't really got a choice there in the moment. We can plan for a day in the future when we can make that change, but we know we're kind of stuck with it for now. And
mm,
that is no wonder that causes severe anxiety and depression, because that feeling of I'm stuck with this and I'm not happy
mm.
is overwhelming and unbearable. But we
And
all
that's
go through
that's
it
where we become
sometimes.
unbalanced
Yeah,
and in
exactly.
our energy.
Yeah, and it is part of our human experience, but
Yeah.
and again, this is what things like Reiki can help with, because they bring things to the surface to enable that shift. So if there is something that isn't serving your highest good, usually that's why people come to Reiki, because they're
Mm,
fully aware that something isn't right and they want to change. And it's when they
mm,
take that action to get some Reiki, or they take that action to get some therapy, or whatever it is they choose, that's them starting that change process, which is, it's a brave thing to do. It's a big life change potentially, and it does take courage to face
mm.
that and say, I need to do something with this, so I'm going to get some help.
Yeah. And like I say, it's sort of bringing it, it is a start, it's a step into the change, and it's bringing it up and making it more doable, because I think when you are in situations that feel impossible, it's very hard to know that there is possibility, to know that there is options, and to know where to start looking or what to start changing. Because it's those little small changes, isn't it? Those little small moments can build up to that big change. So even when, and I've been through some pretty impossible situations that I felt like I would never come out the other end, but yeah, I did. So I feel like, even if it all feels impossible, there usually is some light, there is a way of stepping through. And if Reiki, crystals, tarot, counseling, dancing, whatever is going to help you kind of raise up into that space of being able to be like, believe in yourself and be ready to make that change, is so important and so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
I'm not entirely sure how long we've been talking through it for. I know we've gone on a lovely meander around things that I have found terribly interesting, and I hope that the people that have listened have found interesting too. Have you covered everything that you wanted to share with me today?
Yeah, I think I have. Yeah, I think the only this the sort of, if I wanted to summarize what we've talked about and leave people with a key message, I think is what we touched upon earlier, is carving out a little bit of time for yourself every day if you can, just to sit with what is, and sit with your own thoughts and your own feelings. And I mean, I love, sitting with a cup of tea, looking out into the garden, looking at the trees. It doesn't matter what the weather's doing, because I just like to connect with nature in that way, and just have that moment of peace in your
Mm,
day. The difficulty for me is getting out of that moment of peace and getting back into what I need to do, because I'm so happy in there. I can sit there
yeah.
for hours. Um, but and we've got such busy lives, and that's understood, but just to take those few minutes every day will make our lives so much easier, because you've got that time to connecting with your intuition and connect with how you're really feeling. And it's showing that you're caring for yourself. You're giving yourself a few minutes of your time every day, which you absolutely deserve.
Completely. And I would absolutely echo that, and it is the foundation of what the philosophies are with the Self-Care Club. Anyone who says they're too busy to take 5 minutes for themselves probably need to be taking at least 10. We all need that space to be. We all need it. It's to understand who we are and what we want in the world. We need to connect in with ourselves. So it's, yeah, absolutely take those moments. One of the things I share in my book is like doing mindfulness practice, like when you have a shower. Like most of us bathe daily, so there's ways of fitting things into your life as it is. It's not necessarily about adding in that extra stuff, because when you start, it can feel impossible. It's, you know, take those moments, even if it's 30 seconds, even if all you start with is 30 seconds, prioritize yourself, because you are worth that. You absolutely are worth gifting yourself time in your own life.
Yeah, completely agree. And I love this with the shower, you can imagine the water washing away all your stress, and
Yeah.
ask the water, connect with the element, take away all of my worries and stresses as you're showering, and just like you say, you're utilizing the time that you'd be using anyway. You're not
Mhm.
actually then creating anything extra, but you're doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with me today.
Well, thank you. It's been great.
All your details will be in the show notes, your course links will be in there too, and we will update as you add anything new and you send me new links. They'll be in there for people to check out and come and find you and connect with you and chat with you about Reiki and all of the beautiful treatments that you offer. Thank you so much for coming.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to those that have listened. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. To find out more about me and my guests, you can find me on most social media platforms as SRTT Self-Care. But Facebook is where I spend most of my time, and I would love to connect with you. Until next time, as always, stay curious and be kind to yourself.